Welcome back, guys. We're here with episode 15 of the Help I'm a Camera Nerd podcast. 15 episodes. I feel like they've flown by. This week, we've got another special guest. I love having guests on. I think it just makes it so more interesting. And this week, we're joined with Lili, good friend and editor and co-worker as well for me. And previous co-worker for Anderson, actually, as well. So I'm just going to kick things off. Oh, yeah, I'm here with Films by AW. Don't forget my friend and co-host. You all know him by now. But yeah, let's get straight into it. Lili, tell us about how did you get into editing? Tell us about how you got into all of this.
Wow. So I studied film and documentary, but I wanted to work in production. I don't know why, because I've never been really good with numbers at all, and I'm good with human people, but that's it. And I was back in France, by the way, just so you know. I don't just speak funny. Um, and yeah, I used to work at a production company for a few years, and like the last year I worked there, I was post-production assisting, and I used to spend a lot of time in the edit suite and looking at the editors doing their job. I was like, you know what? It looks so cool. Mainly because they didn't speak to anybody all day, and it looked pretty nice. And just like you're left to do what you have to do best. And then at the end of the day, someone says thank you. So that was great. No, but realistically, I just saw, because I used to work on TV documentary series, and so I organised all the shoots. We had loads of it was pretty big shoots, and seeing the post side of it, it looked so much easier. And in terms of story, it's just like I felt like everything was happening in the edit suite. So I then met my now husband when I was on holiday in Manchester, because people do that in the month of August, just so you know. And yeah, he was telling me that the BBC needed me, and I needed to come and move to Manchester. And I saw that as an opportunity for me to go back to studying, and so I went to the University of Salford and undertook a PG dip where I learned all about post-production in TV documentary production. So here I am now. I've been an editor now for 9 years in the same company. I also do freelance jobs sometimes, and yeah.
So you came to Manchester on holiday. Did I hear that correctly? You came from France to Manchester on holiday.
Yeah, it was initially Liverpool, so yeah. And then just ended up in Manchester for a day, and it all just, unrolled from there. It's got a special energy though. If you're a bit stranger to the place, you come here and there's something about it that you can't quite explain.
Lili, I think sometimes we neglect the importance of post production. What do you feel an editor? What do you think the role of an editor is? Obviously, there's a technical side of it, yes, but you said something really interesting in your answer there. You saw how they craft the story. Tell me how you feel an editor's role creatively. How do you think? Let me rephrase that question. Creatively, how would you define an editor's role and how you've worked and fit in productions?
So, in my view, but it's completely subjective, but it's extremely important, because as an editor, you've got all the pieces of the jigsaw you're trying to put together. And so you've got that overview that I would say any other person in the production team doesn't have. Even if you've been on the show, you like that objectivity that the editor has. And I think to tell the story, it's extremely important. It's like when you write a book, it's important to choose the right words. And I think as an editor, it's really important to pick the right tone. It's not just about the take, it's about what it says about the film that you're editing. It's about the pace. And so I think as an editor, it's extremely important to be able to tell the story, to be able to visualize the story you want to tell, and the director wants to tell, of course, but just completely see it before you even start into it. And it gets a bit neglected because obviously it's what you can't see. It's not the exciting bit. It's not the one with all the projectors. It's not the one with like the microphone and everything. It's the one where it's literally somebody sat in front of a computer doing like this. So I mean, that's probably why it gets neglected. But it's I don't know. I think it's pretty powerful to have like a massive amount of material and transform it into something that's actually watchable. Sorry about that. That's my watch, by the way. But yeah, and I think this is something that tends to be quite forgotten. But it's fine. I don't take it personally.
You know, I know, Mark, you're gonna jump in there. I just want to big Lily up a little bit because so when Lily says taking vast amounts of hours and hours and hours of footage and crafting a story, so a couple examples we have of that. Lily currently in the Parc des Princes in Paris, so that's PSG's home ground. There is an amazing immersive film that Lily directed. That in there, and that was archive footage of former matches of PSG players, little moments of the fan culture, all of this, hours and hours and hours of footage, and crafted into this, not just film that just plays on one screen. It was on 8 screens, wasn't it, Lily? So six screens, and it's all working in tandem, like a truly immersive experience, almost like a theme park as you're going into the stadium or the fan area of the stadium. And another example, recently, I think the last project we worked on when we still work at the same company was a similar project for the Museum of Liverpool, where we made a film about the 2 football clubs in Liverpool. So that's Everton FC and Liverpool FC. And we had hours of footage, didn't we, Lily? Hours and hours and hours and hours of footage. And again, crafting that story. And I think it's I don't call it magic, but the craft and skill of editing, I think, gets lost, that you're just putting this video layer on top of that and creating this transition. When it's literally the story. Lily will tell you the amount of times where I say, Lil, this is kind of what I want. Yeah. I'm filming tomorrow, so I trust you. And Lily will come back with something that I didn't even imagine. And that's, I think, the true role of an editor. It's a creative partner in a project. But sorry, I don't want to hijack this. I just wanted to big you up a little bit, Lil. Sorry. But Mark, yes, your question.
Mine is kind of like, it's leading on really, because what I'm interested in, because I also edit, and I think every editor probably works slightly differently, and I really like that, because that's the great thing about editing, is you can figure out to some degree how you want to go about doing what you do and figure out the best way for you. So I'm really intrigued on like these 2 projects that you said, Anderson, are really good examples, because there are times when you're just given a ton of footage and it's almost overwhelming. And I would really love to know what your process is. You get a ton of footage in, like, how do you turn that into the final film? What are your steps that you go through?
So I suppose it depends what sort of project it is. If it's archives, because those 2 projects were heavily archive based, I would say I would put it in chronological order. Just because that's, for me, the start of a story is just to learn how it works, especially if it's to tell the history of something. I don't always go chronologically, but I think the process is I ingest everything, so I like review all the shots. I do what I would call cleaning, so I just cut what I don't think will work. On that PSG and Liverpool ones, what was really I mean the PSG more like it was because the archives were drip fed to us, so that was really like if you think you're going somewhere, then there's like more coming. So
That's a very politically correct way of saying it, Lil.
I mean, I think it is, but it's fine. It happens a lot. I mean, it's quite rare, I think, to have all the footage you need in one, and then you start editing. It's usually like you get stuff as you go. But yeah, the process for me would be cleaning, reviewing. I usually do that on the first review. I know some people, I mean, especially if you do drama, but I don't do much drama. So in what I do in, say, documentary approach, I would keep the comments that I think work straight away. I wouldn't do a first pass of watching everything and then going back to it, because in my view, it's what works the first time that's the best. And if for me a comment doesn't work the first time, then it won't work the second time. But that's only my approach. I usually do interviews first as well if it's interview based, just to get like a clear idea of the story we're going to tell or the people are going to tell through their interviews. And then I go GVs and have a look at, you know, what we can make that story look like and um have like, well, visuals to also help telling that story. I think really what I focus on the most and is the narrative around it. So archive based, usually depending on what we want to tell, like one of the latest edit I've worked on was only archive based, and it was the client wanted themes. So I saw the themes and they had specific clips for each theme. After putting it all together, because sometimes I just listen to what the client wants, but I saw this and I was like, this is not actually going to work, because the way the archives work, because of what the voiceover was on it, because it was extract from golf footage. So based on this, I saw, okay, it's probably best to put that bit because it's got more emotion at the end. But I always start with putting everything I've got to work with in front of me. And I think in terms of processing, I think I can describe it as, and it's funny because this is actually like a parallel I make a lot, so that tells probably a lot about me, but for me, it's like cooking a dish. So you would get all your ingredients and then you would chop them all individually. You would get the right measurements, everything, before you start putting it in the pot and cook. So that's my approach basically. It's just like I'd rather clean and chop everything separately so I know exactly where everything is, and then that's when it goes in the pan, one thing at a time.
That's a good analogy. I like that analogy. I always think of it like cleaning, like organizing essentially. That's like what an editor feels like as a job, is an organizer. And you're like just putting stuff here. I'll put it there, then I'll put that there, and then I know that's there, and then I'll work on this bit here. And yeah, it's, if you like organizing and keeping things neat and tidy, I always feel like that kind of crosses over into editing quite well.
Definitely, but I think it's not. I mean, I'm an extremely organized person, I think, especially in my house. But my projects are really not that organized. But if you wanna, because I mean editing is a process, and sometimes you get in what we call the zone, and if you wanna really enjoy the zone, because it's actually a really nice thing to be in. I really absolutely love the zone. Is when you've got everything and you can just like, you know, a bit like when Ratatouille does his thing. You know, it's actually nice. So when you want to get in the zone, you need to know exactly where things are. So I think being organized is really important because you can actually enjoy the process. Like organizing the thing is not necessarily like the most exciting part. I think it's quite therapeutic for me because it's, you know, like putting things in order. But yeah, it is to help you to then achieve your creative touch on an edit.
That's a really good point there, Lily, that you make, that there's a process to editing. You know, and some when you're maybe working for yourself or you're a self shooter and you're a self editor, you know, you can't just jump straight into a project because you know where something is. But when you're working in a team, you need to have that structure in place because, you know, like a lot of people, you know, at least when we started out, Lily, you know, when they had to learn to assist and edit, you're just preparing the project for the actual online editor to then creatively go through it. But that process of well, creating dailies, as they call them, or, you know, syncing the sound and all of that stuff is integral to the process, because what will happen if that's not sorted out in the beginning, it will completely unravel the further along you get in the project. And I think that's a really important thing for editors to understand, that it's sometimes you can get in the habit of, when you're doing it for yourself, that's fine, but what, and that's my first, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is, how, when you're working in a team, how do you find that different to working by yourself on a project by yourself? What's the differences and the benefits and the negatives of it?
What in terms of working with somebody
Just
next
working
to
in a
me?
team, with whether it's let's start off with, let's make it a twofold question. Working in an editing team, so alongside other editors, and then working with a director that's maybe not gonna that will be with you creatively but not technically.
Well, I mean, it's quite difficult for me to answer because I work with other editors, but we don't usually share projects. I mean, I've never had someone pre-edit for me. It's just
Talk about
the
that.
nature. The nature of the job I do at Fuzzy Duck is that I get the raw footage, the raw bits of sound, and then I deal with it, and the next thing that comes out is like a freshly cooked film. But it's so I don't actually mind. I sometimes there was a time where I wished that I had everything chopped up before I could jump on something, but then it kind of helps understanding what the shoot was about. And it's, I mean, the film is not just, for me, it's not just a finished product, it's also the story behind a shoot. And yeah, I like seeing what's happened. I liked even seeing like who clapped the board or stuff like that, so I really don't mind. I don't necessarily like jumping back and forth between editors with an edit, mainly because what Mark said, it's, I mean, everybody has their own process. And I think there's like as many edits that exist as many editors. So you give the same material to two editors and you'll have a completely different product, which is completely fair enough because it's based on each experience, each way of looking at something, each way of telling a story. Um, I like, well, I mean, that's the thing is like, we all tell stories differently, and this is why I like being solely in charge of an edit. But this is, I know it's going to sound really pretentious, but I actually like being in charge, being the one that gets the footage and then the one that's, exports it. And it's actually really nice because that means that you've done it. It's cool. That's a beautiful thing about it. Is like something that you do is like your brain almost, because it's okay. You need to technically know how the software works because it just makes your workflow quicker. Um, but ultimately, it's just what you think will work, and you just do that. It's just a link between what you see in your with your eyes and your brain, and then your hands do this, and that's it. It's just like nothing else that goes in it, which is, I think it's actually pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Nice.
I agree. I agree. I wanna talk about, because I know you said that you haven't done narrative a lot, but you did edit Anderson's film Diembe, and it was a short film, but it was a pretty hefty short film. It was like there was a lot there. How do you find the process of it? Do you enjoy editing narrative? How does that differ? What are your processes in that situation?
Well, so I did it, like you said, I didn't edit many dramas, but I love it because I find it so much easier. I don't know if it makes sense, but because it's scripted, I don't really have to think about the order of things. It's already kind of there. All I have to worry about is that take working, because also on all the scripted, because we also do corporate scripted films, and it's fine. But it's I never ever had a script report that's somebody on shoot that tells me that take was good, that take wasn't too good. So I always have to look at each and every take. But I absolutely love this because it's deciding, you decide as the editor. I mean, usually you would work with the director. I think if you were to do things really the traditional way, is you'd have the director sat with you all throughout the edit almost. With djembe, it really wasn't like this. And this is something that I think I will touch base on later, but it's the relationship with the director and the editor that is extremely important, because you need to understand what goes in each other's brain. I don't know if that makes sense, but I mean, when I started working with Anderson, it was trying to figure out what he wanted. As soon as I got this, then it was, Lily, can you do this? He'd go, come back, and I'd have it done. And for djembe, it was honestly the freedom I had with this was mental, because I honestly saw that we'd spend, our evenings in the office editing it. No, I just went back home with a hard drive, spent a week editing it, and then sent him the cut, and it was great. And with drama, what I really really like is that it's you decide on the flow, you decide on the tone, on how long you want to stay on something. You are a bit like you're the master of the drama, like of the, sorry, I'm losing the word now. What's the word? The pace. It's not really just the pace, but it's what people understand. So or how the story is approached. Sometimes how it's scripted doesn't, or how it's storyboarded doesn't quite work. I seem to remember on djembe I suggested stuff to Anderson, and he was like, you know what, Lily, yes. And I think that was pretty good, because sometimes for me it's like, okay, for drama especially, if something doesn't work, it's either the editor's suggestions or there's not many solution. Mainly because of that objectivity that the director doesn't necessarily have. I think editors don't usually go on shoot, and that's for a reason, because you don't have the satellite thought of, oh, that's the money shot, or that's the one that took ages, or that's the one that we filmed under the rain for 5 hours. You don't have this, so you go with it with a completely new look. And especially on drama, because drama works much more differently on shoots especially. But I absolutely love it, because it's just, I don't know, like the tone and pace is so different. It's so different. Like the way you tell the story. I mean, I remember, it's funny because I remember one evening I was editing it at home, and it was plugged on my because I was living in a really small flat, and I was working from my TV. So I was like editing on my laptop, and it was plugged into the big TV, so that was like the output. And I remember just one evening editing it together, and that's when the zone happened, when I was just like, I felt like I was almost like playing violin. It was so smooth and it was so nice. And I don't even play violin, but it's, if I did, that's probably how it felt.
I think the one thing that you have to remember, because as a director, if you've got a separate editor, is that, a opinion, and they're always going to tell you what they think. But you have to remember that you've got that editor because you respect their opinion, and you just have to trust them. It's like what I've recently, in the past few years when I've been editing, and like you say, Lil, usually what will happen is I'll do a first edit, and then the director will come from that point onwards. So they'll get that initial edit, and then we'll sit together. And I honestly find that you spend just as much time discussing the edit than you do editing. It's always like this. And it's always this back and forward. It's like, well, I think this, and they'll think this. But then it's trying to figure out in that what is the right way to do. And it's kind of nice as an editor, because you're like, well, I'll give you my opinion, but you're the director, so ultimately you have to make the choice. And it's almost like, win or lose, this movie's on you. So make the right decision. I can only give you my opinion and tell you what I think professionally, but ultimately the responsibility is on the director to say yes or no. And I quite like that as an editor. It's quite nice to just step back and go, well, it's on you. This film's good, you'll get the credit. If this film's bad, you'll also get the blame. So it's quite a nice thing as an editor to kind of be able to do that.
I mean, it's good you bring up djembe, Lily, and I think that experience, I always feel it's one of the best experiences. Obviously, I've mentioned in the podcast many a time about Diembe, blah blah blah. But I think the thing about that process is you involve other people to give you more collaborators. A film isn't a film. Maybe the director has the vision, the director writer has the vision, but a film takes many parts for it to become a whole. And I'm a real big believer that there is no point sitting with somebody and telling them what to edit, especially when you can edit. And, I'm a below average editor, so it's like, well, if I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm doing, I'll just do it myself. But the whole point of getting another person involved, and someone's like yourself, Lily, is to have another creative partner, have a collaborator. I love seeing people care so much about the story that comes from my head to be like, I don't think that works. I think we want to have that, and I think that right there is the beauty of filmmaking. You're discussing these pretend worlds that's come from somebody's brain, and they're becoming real, and they're starting to mean something. And that's what, as a director, that's what I value about filmmaking. And I just felt, yeah, I mean, some directors are different. I know some directors that like to sit down and tell people what to do, and that's fine. That's their way, and every director is different. But I prefer, hands off. Let me see what you can do. Let me see what you think. This is what I've said. You see the script. This is the storyboard. That's one version. What do you think? And I always find those happy accidents, or as it were, right? Where maybe it's not an accident, it's just the creativity comes to a head, where you just see the beauty that comes out when someone else is thinking about your story. And I just think I think being a director that is been used to for years having an editor as a right hand person, which is you were, Lil, and then going to the step where you start to edit more for yourself, it is a weird transition, and you do miss that creative partner. And I mean, I do have that now, obviously with Andy Salamanchek, for Drudy Films, name drop there. And but it's like, when you have those periods when you're doing more editing yourself, yes, you're it's more quote unquote cost efficient, for let's say, but in reality, you are losing a little bit of the soul of the project, because again, you're missing that other person's creativity that comes in and tells that story. That's my opinion, right? Other people have an opinion. Everyone's right. It's just creativity. There isn't one right or wrong way. It's just getting it done. But obviously technology has changed, and we love talking about tech on this podcast. Let's what have you found? What are the big changes have you seen that's come across in editing and post-production in the last 9 years, from when you started being an editor to now? What's been the biggest things and improvements that you've seen?
Well, I mean, when I started being interested in editing, it was still Final Cut 7. So, and it was about digitizing tapes still. So, yeah, I am that old. Um, so it wasn't fun, and because it was like an element of don't screw it up, or we lose everything, which was extremely stressful, and it took so much time, and I think it took out the craft of editing again. Like just ingesting, and FCP7, you had to render, so you had to wait to watch your sequence back, and it was just like, I think it was killing the flow a bit. Then I did a workshop when FCPX went out, or Final Cut 10, and I remember being absolutely amazed when the guy said, there's no need to render, it renders automatically, and I was like, what? That is amazing. And also that you didn't have to transcode anything, because you could ingest all formats. And that, for me, I was just like, this is great. But it's just because it was my experience of post-production assisting before, when I was like, this is cool, because that's actually a really boring bit. And I mean, it is important, but it was a bit boring, I'm not gonna lie. And yeah, I started properly editing with Final Cut 10. And then when I went to uni, I went on Avid, And again, that was, for me, it was a huge setback. I was not really liking it at all. I was like, they make it way too complicated for me anyway. All I wanted to do was, cracking on with it. I didn't want to faff around with like weird shortcuts and how like transcoding thing and ingesting metadata, but this is maybe where I'm wrong. But for me, that was a massive step back. So I had the choice of either carrying on with Avid or learning Premiere. And then when I opened Premiere, so that was 10 years ago, it was already great because I am a huge Premiere advocate. It crashes a lot, but I absolutely love it because you could do everything you want in it. I know you can do everything you want in those programs, but that one is mine, like mine to choose, and I absolutely love it. Especially coming from Final Cut Pro 7, and you just like, it's just taking too much to do anything. And Avid was the same for me. It really wasn't user friendly, and I know it's not meant to be user friendly. I know it's meant to be like a proper editing software. Where, like for me, it was just, yeah, you're not an editor if you don't understand how the program works. It's not that, it's that you can't actually edit if you don't know how it works. And for me, Avid is just too long to understand how it works. I can't be bothered. So I went to Premiere straight away. And from there, I could see the progression with was like the multiple tools. So I know Lumetri was a thing that happened halfway through my editing career, and I know it's something, it sounds a bit silly, but for me it's like, this is cool because I can do this. I can grade within Premiere. So that means we can ingest raw, and then I can just add a LUT, and it looks great, and I don't need to. And this is not me being lazy, but I feel like anything that makes your life easier and quicker, and it still looks good, or you're happy with how it looks, it should be accepted. For me, I know I should learn probably DaVinci. I know about it thanks to Mark because he showed us at work how to grade with it. But that's about the extent of my knowledge in DaVinci. Again, because I've got my workflow in Premiere, and I think it's fine. I don't see why I would need to use a different program unless my work really required it, but it doesn't. So that's, yeah. For me, the progression I've seen like technically throughout the years is being able to ingest raw material from different cameras, and you don't have to transcode it. You can just crack on. All you can do is like maybe proxies. Oh yeah, the proxy workflow is actually a really good one as well, because that means you can work from home, and 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 then you relink. And that means for example with Anderson, I've not seen Anderson in real life in absolute ages, but we've exchanged some footage with proxy, and that for me wouldn't have been possible maybe 5 years ago, because I don't think the proxy workflow worked just as well as it does now, in Premiere anyway. So that's another thing where you're not hammering your hard drive, or you can just exchange files that are not 50 gigs for one file, and that's great.
I think that's really interesting because we seem to echo this same thing all the time, don't we, Anderson? It's the same with cameras, really. It's like your tools shouldn't limit you. They should be the things that you love using, essentially. So that's why, we can never decide on what's the best camera or what's the best, this or that, because really it's just whatever ticks your boxes and whatever helps you do your job to the best ability. And I agree with you. I've used Avid, and Avid just felt like it was designed in a way that older editors knew how to use, but it was very difficult for people coming in. It's almost like it was overcomplicated for the sake of protecting the job role. Like they were scared in some way that other people could learn to use this software, like that was a bad thing. Whereas I feel like software today is designed way more with people using it in mind. It's like, no, we want you to use this software. Come and use our software. It's so easy. And, Premiere is that software. It literally, you can guarantee that it's going to work with the stuff that you're using with it. even today, it probably has the most flexibility in terms of formats, like you said. All the raw files work in there. You know, they support things relatively quickly, and it just seems to be the most widely adopted editing software in terms of people using it online anywhere. I know Avid is still used for some feature films, but you know, Adobe's obviously coming in on that market as well. And yeah, it's a good tool, is something that you enjoy using, not something that frustrates you to use like some programs do.
I mean, there's a thing about industry standards, and I know Avid's been the industry standard, especially for broadcast and features, for a while. I know they are shifting things a little bit. I know some broadcast companies start using Premiere because of that flexibility with format, especially for news. It's just so quick. It's so much quicker. I mean, maybe an Avid user would say, I don't agree. But I mean, from my understanding of Avid anyway, I know it's pretty quite restrictive still. And yeah, I mean, the industry is changing, and I think it's good because I think that's what one thing that was really impressive for me, in a way that I wasn't quite ready to make the jump, is I've always wanted to do documentaries for television. That's my background, and I never could because I mean, I never could in the UK, because in France it's a little bit different. But in the UK I never could because the industry standard was Avid, and unless I learned Avid I couldn't do broadcasts, and that was it. So that's, I mean, which I find a bit ridiculous because realistically I've got the skills. I know I have the skills. Someone might say, well, you don't really have the skills for broadcast documentaries because you don't have any long form under your belt or anything. But for me, I think that's really restrictive, and it's not really it's not proactive. It's not helping anybody to say, oh, you don't know how to use Avid, so sorry, you can't actually work there. I know some companies need to use what they choose to use, but for as an editor, it's just a shame to be restricted in one thing, that if you don't like it, you don't like it. I mean, I know like some people like driving Volvos and some people like driving Renaults. I mean, for me it's exactly the same, you know. It's a bit weird. That little, like, there's like a little petty war, like, you know, like a bit of a turf war about, oh, you're in Premiere, you know. Oh, you're on Avid, you must be a real editor then. It's a bit weird.
There's a good chance Avid Media Composer won't be around in 5 years. You know, when you look at because the reality of, you know, the you know, Avid used to be a program that cost like 80 grand, and you had to buy a whole computer rig, and now it's, you know, it has to fight against Premiere or DaVinci Resolve that's free, and the issue they're having, you know, from my understanding, is the adoption just isn't there. It's all fine and well saying it's only, you know, the Hollywood standard, but it's like Hollywood is just one part, or high-end TV is just one part of media, and actually wider adoption would have been a good thing because, you know, capitalism. So the issue you have, I mean, look, this is more of a business of film side of it. It's they I think they just got sold off to a firm that's basically a hedge fund that's used to just stripping companies down and selling it off, you know. So that doesn't bode well for them. So sure, they can say, oh, you know, real editor only use Avid. Well, when it stops having updates in like 5 years, who knows? But I think you make a great point about the industry, and I think this is one thing that I've always wondered whether I've harnessed enough, you know, or been brave enough. The industry is what you make it. Now, you know, it's all fine and well saying we aspire to make, you know, it work in Hollywood or work in high-end TV or whatever. But the reality with online content and with YouTube, not Vimeo, YouTube, it's its own platform that you can have your own TV channel. And some of the stuff that people are making on YouTube, the quality of it is fantastic. But then also, the amount of people watching it is incredible. And I'm not talking about PewDiePie or Jake Paul. I'm talking about real documentary filmmakers that are making great stuff. And So you don't need, and they didn't need a company to say, oh yeah, you need to do this. You know, there was no gatekeepers there. There was no, you need to use Avid, because you know, people watching on YouTube don't care what you edit in. They might be editing in DaVinci. They might be editing in Final Cut Pro X, Premiere. It doesn't matter, because the philosophy of editing has to change, or it has changed, I believe, to it's about what's being output. It's the end product. And if you're making it difficult to make that end product, your product's not going to be used, because making it difficult means more time. And if it takes more time, time is money, as we have, and now there seems to be less and less, or there's the same amount but people don't want to spend, or that there's just more stuff needing to be made. So there has to be a new way, and I think that's what, you know, I think has been the big change. I mean, I've opened Avid once and I was turned off. And again, I'm not an editor, so, well, I'm not a editor full time. So, but it's like, it's got to be about making it easier, because again, making it easier makes it more accessible. Like what happened with you know, me and Mark with the 5D in that generation. You know, it wasn't that you had to hire a Super 35 film camera that was really expensive to use in certain lenses. We could make a filmic like image with this DSLR that you bought for £2,000, and it was an incredibly disruptive force. And I think that all of filmmaking now is starting to have it. It was like that was the start of the disruption, or the democratization of film. And now we're in a stage where now everything's getting democratized. You know, even CGI or even Photoshop. It's easier to use these programs. And is that a bad thing? I don't think it is. You know? But I'm not sure where I'm going with this rant. But
Almost feels like we need an AI podcast for upcoming AI podcast. What do we all think? Are we coming soon? I have a pretty good question. I think it'd be a good one to finish on as well, because we're coming to the end of our time. But is there I know we've talked about a few projects, so if there's a different one, let us know. But is there a project for you that just stands out as being one that you're, you know, proud of, that you enjoyed?
I don't have one job in particular in mind. There's a few, but I think they all have that one thing in common, that I was left. It's just because I was left to do it, and it was nice. And I think for me, it's not. I like working as a team. I like working with people. But if I have a pretty clear vision of where I want the edit to go, especially when it's from archives, then I'd rather be left on my own to do it. I think there's a bit of like direction into it as well. But no, they all have that one thing in common, that it was also heavily archive based, and that's when I used music when I thought, you know what, I'm gonna try it and I'm gonna see if it works, but I'm pretty sure it will. Is that when I have that little fire in my heart when I listen to something, or I listen to a piece of track with the visuals in mind, when I'm like, ooh. And there's like something that's really weird to explain, and I'm just like, everybody's gonna be like, oh my god, she's nuts. But it's actually like, it's a thing, is when I know it works, I know it works because there's like something happening where it burns a little bit, but in a good way. And that they all have that thing in common, where I'm like, cool, that's how I'm going to get in the zone. And these are the edits where I don't get in the zone with all edits. I mean, there's a lot of edits where I just know what I need to do on it. But others that are a bit more challenging, where you get stuck in with it. You just like, from one shot to the other, you try to find that one element that's gonna work, or like maybe that the story is from the beginning to like another really random section towards the end. You're like, it's just linking and just everything makes sense to you. And these are like my favorite edits, is when you look at it and you're like, okay, it speaks to me. So if it speaks to me, surely it will speak to other people. And it's usually, I think like the one I have in mind is it was for a pitch video that we did on behalf of a client, and the piece of music I used was like a classical trap. So it was a classical track, but as a trap version. And on paper you say that, okay, yeah, Mozart as a trap artist, you're like, nah, Lily, it won't work, it won't work. And then I heard the song and I was like, this is it. And because for me, music really, really is important as well. So that I think they will have that common thing that the music track and the visuals just make sense. I can't explain it, but yeah.
I think you did. I think you did a real good job of explaining it.
Sorry, I hope that the little fire inside is not too weird, by the way. But I don't think there's any other way I could describe the zone. Because I mean, if you told me the zone before I became an editor, I would have imagined like, somebody with a hood on and working in the dark and be like, which it probably is what it looks like. but yeah, it feels nice. And the zone is for me when you truly get creative and you truly get to express yourself through what you're manipulating, because at the end of the day, that's what editing is. You're manipulating images to tell a story, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you're right. In real life, it probably looks like you're just sat there in a mood. But in my head, I always feel like I look like Tom Cruise from Minority Report, where he's like, but in reality, I'm probably just sat there like.
I mean, I feel like an absolute gremlin most of the time, but I wish, honestly, my biggest dream is to be able to edit like this. That would make so much more sense.
Every editor's dream.
That'll be Premiere 2030.
I mean, with the iPad, it probably is a thing already.
Yeah, probably.
It will, yeah.
No, that's well exciting.
Well, we're gonna call it there, Lily. Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure listening to your experience and you talk, reminding us and those special jobs, but then also giving us an insight to post-production and editing. And guys, you can find us all on social media. We're gonna include those links to each of our channels. You can see Lily's work on her social. Can we see your work on social media? Can we see your work, Lily?
What, me work like this, like gremlin work?
No, see your work. Just go to Media City with like a telescopic lens. But we'll include all the links to profiles and stuff in the show notes. But thanks again, guys, for and girls. Sorry, let me pineapple. Thanks again, everyone, for listening into the podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, to both Films by AW and Help I'm a Nerd. You can see our channels for more podcasts and other filmmaking content. And we'll see you on the other side. Stay shooting.